Okay, I'm going to open the floor because I want us to have a real, robust debate about the state of the nation. Allow me to just to abuse my position for 40 seconds or so. Let me throw out, hopefully, 4 provocative and 1, like Aubrey, optimistic proposition. Let me start with the provocative ones to get us going. In 2008, a certain president, the second president of the Republic, was recalled. The debate is still out whether it was constitutionally permitted to do so, but he was recalled. The difference between that president and his successor, I remember debating with Aubrey Machiki and colleagues, is that the one ultimately lost control over the state, over the party, and was recalled, but never lost control over the state. Even to the day he did his last cabinet meeting, he was in control of government and the state. And for all the rumors that he was a centralizer, I think those rumors are true. All roads led to the union buildings. He was in control of the state, he lost control of the party. I suggested at the time, we may head for a scenario, given the situation, that the successor may become so bogged down with matters of party and ruling alliance that the state may go into free fall. And let me say it because it's on my heart. Maybe the state currently is on autopilot because of the internal obsessive focus with survival within the ruling party. First proposition, state versus party. Second proposition, and this is something we agreed on until very recently, I suspect. South Africa is a deeply traumatized state. We are a country facing a social crisis, and we've never dealt with the legacies and consequences of our past and the social crisis which it triggered. Hence the idea that we face the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and joblessness. So goes the narrative. Okay? So we are a traumatized state, and even more than poverty, inequality is a deep fault line in this society that you can never hope to address violent crimes. In this country, violent crime, for as long as you have that fault, that particular fault line. Third proposition, the state of the nation today, we have become a highly factionalized society. Everywhere you go, there are slates and factions and groupings. And you must not talk about certain leaders, you must talk about others. And here I agree with probably all colleagues who invoke the idea that it has become about the leader. And not just the leader in the ruling party, by the way, not just President Zuma. Even within opposition parties, it's these dominant individuals and so on. And here's therefore the third, very provocative proposition. For me, I agree with all. I ironically don't think democracy is under threat in South Africa. And that's going to be my last proposition, the state of democracy. But for a period in the foreseeable future, we may go through a very, very dangerous phase of institutions being used for party political purposes, not just by the ruling party. Look at Parliament. It was political squabbles that that brought us to the unthinkable. We all knew, because the commander-in-chief, that's of the 6% party, warned that unless a certain question is answered by the 12th of February, we're going to do something. So I wasn't surprised, as I said on Tuesday, that something was done. But the severity of what happened, I think, took us all by surprise. So if it was the jamming of signals and so on, that's what I talked about institutions now being used to protect leaders and the like. Was that the fourth one? The final one. I put it to you that this may just be a dip we go through. That these very institutions that may be used and abused are the ones that's going to pull us back from the abyss. That South Africa's constitutional democracy is its greatest asset, and it's that asset that will prevent us from becoming a failed state. We are not there. We are seeing signs of things, but it's not. And I just conclude on this note, and here I want to really echo what Aubrey said. For me, the most disappointing thing about what's going on in South Africa, you can have your views about the president. By the way, I think the president was vintage today. I mean, his performance in Parliament today, I think the president was thoroughly briefed today, and he went prepared to Parliament. He even called the leader of the EFF Honorable Malema. I congratulate you, but there was just a mood and so on. But I think where Aubrey is dead right, the greatest disappointment about South Africa at the moment is that one of the value adds we've given to the world was the theme of Tuesday, Aziz Pahat's book, Negotiations and Dialogue. And yet we are deeply intolerant at the moment of dissenting voices, of critical voices, of debates. But I also suggest to you, I think we're going to turn the corner soon, and people are going to openly start to debate and talk, even within the ruling party, and yes, even within the EFF. With those words, let me open the floor. The floor is open. Introduce yourself. You do not have to reveal your bank account details. Just tell us. I promise you, you're wearing a red tie. I will not mess around with you. I will give you a chance. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Mapungubwe Institute. I'm from Yahoo DJ. Well, my question relates to the submission by Aubrey in terms of that we're going to measure the state of the nation, to measure the state of the South African discourse. I would like to argue, for instance, that the reason why we are unable to begin to have sufficient discourse or fruitful discourse is because the South African commercial media has taken side. Therefore, it is unable to provide independent views or views that can be bought by a separate side. I don't think that the South African media in particular, and I would like to use this word commercial media because that's what they are. They're in a commercial business to sell papers. I don't think that they are able to provide different perspectives as presented by different parties because fundamentally they already belong to a certain ideology that belongs to a certain party. Secondly, it is my challenge to the South African commercial media. For one day, can they sell their paper using the back page and see how many sales will make? Because I think they're making money for headlines that do not have meaning to substance and content in terms of the articles. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So number 2 was, yes, sir. Please give me a microphone.
Thank you. My name is Sibusiso Ruben Pagana. I'm from Ivory Park. Well, I think answering part of the chairman's the close at the recording, I think the 8 days in September is trying to give us a clue what happened, also the factions between the SLM and whatever. But I think one of the things that we are lacking probably as the citizens is understanding probably also the role of Parliament and the role probably of the personnel that are holding different positions, the presidency, the ministers and the Parliament. Then I think we can come to respond whether it was fair or not fair, because it was a party that took the decision. And taking it again from someone that I apologize if he's a professor, a doctor. I just read it on college, I'm a doctor. He mentioned that parties have personalized in a way of defending. And I think from coming from different parties, we know the story that if a leader is in the upper structure, whatever decision that are taken in the upper structure will abide by that decision and then further pushing those decisions in a formalized organizational platform. And not that possibly, particularly in the ANC, that maybe they are personalizing, possibly they are defending, while in internal structures they are criticizing. And I think they are naming it that particular process in the NDR. I think the last speaker is the one that further covered everything, because he spoke about critiquing all forms of power. Because I think the question about this debate is what is the state of the nation. Really wanted us to further understand what are the components that constitute the state. And I think the army that we spoke about, the security system, the media that comrades are raising now, the political parties of which now they're in an executive side of the government, you know, and we are lacking to further explain that what did the liberation movement probably got after 1994? Did it got entire state power or only one component of state power? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So where was number three? Number three. Number three. Yes, sir. 3, 4, and 5. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Mr. Sandile Mjowa. I'm a BA political student within this institution. Monarchism never worked before. As a result, the Americans dealt our well-being on the 4th of July 1776. Communism was permanently eradicated in 1989. Religion never worked. That's why in Central African Republic, Christians and Muslims butchered each other like cockroaches. Moreover, my question is actually the political ideology that we're using today is not working effective, which is the so-called what is it, brother? The one that is against communism. I'm sorry, I apologize. My question is, if this political ideology is working, why then the socio-economic status is widening on a daily basis? Black people have been suffering for a longer dispensation, of which until today they are still suffering. Now the lives of white people have improved tremendously even during this dispensation, 20 years of democracy. My question exactly is, which political ideology or economic ideology may be instigated in order to come with a workable solution that will accommodate everyone?
Thank you. For a moment, I thought you wanted to smuggle in a sixth speaker there, but thanks for finishing. Fourth.
Good evening. My name is Matala Salofele. I'm a master student at the politics department right here in UJ. My question is directed and David, but more than anything else, I think it's a question that I pose to everyone. David mentioned that the lack of leadership is the missing link in achieving a developmental state. Now my question arises, this lack of leadership, are we talking about political leadership here? What kind of leadership are we talking about? Is this lack of leadership directed at an individual or at a collective leadership, captains of politics themselves. What about civil society? What about the citizenry itself? What happened to the culture of an active citizenry? That's the question I pose to everyone. And secondly, I think it's Prof. Fikeni. He said something about Parliament, the institution, has become more about individuals than the actual institution itself. Now the question is, don't you think Parliament has always been a ceremonial institution? It's just that the happenings of now have actually put it under the microscope. Thank you.
Did you say you're doing a master's in politics at UJ? Yeah, an excellent question. That was excellent. I'm very neutral and objective, clearly. To one member of the Red Berets, please. Sorry, EFF. One members of the EFF. There's just one.
Thank you, Speaker. Good evening, everyone, my fellow fighters and prospective supporters of the EFF. Firstly, I would like to address, I think there's the other guy who spoke before the one who was asking about the correct ideology that can be implemented to curb the current state of the nation, which is in crisis. I think it's only Marxism and Leninism that can work. You can come and engage me after here. Okay. Also, again, I would like to borrow the words of Eugene Terreblanche before he passed away. The guy said that the apartheid was so strong that it would reproduce itself within a black man. This is what we are seeing right now, a black and black war. People, we are fighting each other, xenophobic attacks. A black security person is beating another black political leader in parliament. What is that? I'll tell you, the only problem that we are facing is the one that we are directly facing right now. The white people. They are the custodians of the in-services and all wrongdoing that happen in our country. And I think that we must not hinder and tender around things. The problem is that we are indeed politically free, but economically we are suppressed. Can you please deal with the elephant in the house, which is the white people who are keep on benefiting, which was already done who was getting to them. Thank you.
No, but on a serious note. So let me push you on that point, because you're making a very clear, provocative point. It shouldn't be provocative. So what should we do about and with? What is it that you expect the former oppressor to do?
It is very simple. I'll start by quoting the statistics that 80% of the South African land it is owned by white people, and the rest it is being bought by the willing buyer, willing seller policy by the ANC. The only thing, the predecessors, they must give back our land. That is what we are looking for. Why? We cannot buy land that was stolen. We cannot. You can, even if they steal your cell phone, you cannot buy your stolen cell phone. It is yours. The land belongs to Africans and not white people.
Thank you for that. You called me speaker when you responded to me. I hope you're not confusing me with a speaker in Cape Town, please. Thank you very much. Professor Fikeni. Thank you. Professor Fikeni.
I hope this is talking, eh? It's not.
Microphone.
Is it talking now?
Well, you know, so it cannot.
Thank you very much. Now that I'm settled after rushing from Pretoria and being punished by my friend here, Chris, to be the first speaker, I do think that we may choose media correctly for its bias and lack of transformation. But the most important thing is to understand the hegemonic power structure within which it is located and ask questions. That which was found in 1994, has it transformed? Or has the emerging black political elite simply assimilated to the existing power structure? The issues of hegemonic powers. That's why each political leader who feels not secure, no security of tenure with the cabinet reshuffles and so forth, one leg is usually in some business and friends, and those in business will then say, please open up tenders whilst you're still a minister, so that we will welcome you when the horse has dumped you. So that insidious relationship between business and politics need a very serious look. Because given the corruption that we often say government has done this, government has done that, we never really analyze the corruption on the other side. The big construction companies colluded to get tenders in the range of billions. The bread prices being fixed for almost 7 years by the bread producing companies. We often look the other way. But not only that, there is a racial dimension to this. And I would be surprised that in 10, 20 years, racism would have just disappeared. I'm sure in the US they can tell you that they've been trying for years, but from time to time, it bubbles to the surface in Australia and so forth. Take one simple example. When the big four companies colluded, not a single face showed up on television or in the newspapers. At most, they were showing logos of these companies. But when Bobby Mutaung was involved in the alleged corruption of Bombela Stadium, we could see the face and we could see him being walked to prison. So those are some of the dimensions that we should be looking at. But now let me address the second issue. One colleague there said, no, people are defending the NDR, not defending the leaders and so forth. I wish I had enough time to demonstrate empirically that shift towards personalities in politics. Take one simple example, the landing of the Guptas at Waterkloof. Is there any NDR trace in that action? And leaders were so scared to address it. Even Mantashe, who got angry spontaneously, was reprimanded later for not getting mandate to be angry. So that tells you that it's not a reference to any values of the party or principles of the party that is important now. It's where the leader stands. And then you move closer to the leader, you support the leader no matter what. Then in return, the leader will deploy you. That's the patronage network that I'm talking about. The same with DA. Once Lindwe Masibuko started thinking that she was independent enough to be independent, and the other lady was in Ntuli. Yes, and they crossed paths with the leader. Their fate was sealed. And the leaders who behaved and moved in tune when the leader of the opposition went for toy-toying during that time of campaigns, they got rewarded. The same fate you'll see within EFF. Those who have crossed paths. So the rise of personalities and the personalization of politics has come at the expense of institutional internal democracy. So that's the point that I think we ought to make. But generally, with leadership, it's leadership in all spheres that we should be talking about, not just the political leadership. In essence, South Africa has a structural problem of monopoly capital, each sector dominated by just few players. So even by market standards, power is so concentrated that the competitiveness, the openness, you don't find. Thank you.
Even amongst analysts, right? There's a monopoly of analysts.
Well, with analysts, we do open the door, but slightly, so that there's no avalanche.
On the point someone is making about the personalization of politics, there is another important dynamic there. If you look at the battle between the EFF and the ANC in Parliament, it's very clear to me that an important aspect of that battle is the personal hatred between the president of the ANC and the president of the EFF. And the danger there is that personal hatreds are turned into national issues, which engulf institutions and society, or parts of society as a whole. I said I'm the optimistic one in this debate. So I don't agree with you when you say the state is on autopilot. The autopilot function is a very sophisticated function. I don't think you can accuse the state of being on autopilot if we consider the fact that the autopilot function is a sophisticated function in an aeroplane. So that's my optimistic take on that. And this brings up to what David was saying about the developmental state. It exists in the realm of aspiration, not in the realm of reality. If this were a developmental state, two of the most important elements is that it would be autonomous and embedded, neither of which are true of the post-apartheid state, in addition to the fact that you can't accuse it of being on autopilot with respect to this sophisticated function that I'm talking about. So it's neither on autopilot, nor is it a developmental state. If it's not on autopilot, my optimistic take is that the pilot might crash land if we're not careful.
Or is there somebody in the cockpit?
There is someone in the cockpit. There is someone in the cockpit. But as I say, the pilot might crash land with this aeroplane. The media, without making sweeping statements about the so-called independent media or commercial media, for me, what is critical is that news, contrary to what some in the media will have us believe, is not valueless. News is a construct. News is socially constructed. That which a journalist, an editor, a news editor selects to be news is a function of selection. And that selection itself is a function of the fact that news is not valueless, it's value-laden. And that takes me back to what I said, that it is still the case that we have a cultural majority in South Africa whose ways of seeing, being, and other ways have become dominant. And their worldview has become dominant. And that in part will be reflected in news as something that is value-laden and as something that is socially constructed. My final point is on leadership. There are two kinds of people, there are many, but I want to isolate two kinds of people in the debate about leadership. Let me start with the dishonest. You see, those who harp on the lack of leadership of ANC leaders, which is not false, in the sense that the ANC is going through a period of decline. I can explain later what I mean by that. And decline is also experienced at the level of leadership. But you have South Africans who engage with the issue of the lack of leadership in the ANC and in government dishonestly. They do so with the aim of trying to drive home the point, the erroneous point, that the failures and weaknesses of the ANC, and there are many, constitute the totality of what is wrong with our post-apartheid period. Because by doing so, if you succeed, you will divert attention from other things that are wrong about our post-apartheid reality, for which the ANC is not to blame. And then you can avoid debates like the race debate, the connection between that and the economy, and so on. Also, they engage dishonestly because some of these arguments are proxy arguments for something else that they can't articulate. The belief, the deep-seated belief that black people cannot govern. And these arguments are about confirmation bias in support of this deep-seated belief. Now, of course, those who support the ANC go to the other extreme of thinking that what I am saying describes in full what is happening in South Africa, when it only does so in part. The reality is that the ANC has many weaknesses and failures. Then you have those who, I think, deal with the leadership issue more honestly. Firstly, they recognize that there is a chronic lack of leadership across the board. In politics, in business, in civil society, the church, across the board. South Africa suffers from a chronic lack of leadership. What we do not suffer from, however, is a lack of leaders. See, probably that's the irony about South Africa. There are many leaders, good ones, in business, in politics, in labor, in civil society, and elsewhere. The lack of leadership for me is about the fact that these leaders are not prepared to lead beyond the narrow confines of their interests and the narrow confines of the sectors they lead. Worse, they are not prepared to lead beyond the maximization of narrow interests, and they don't realize that this will lead to mutual destruction. And finally, to go back to those who engage with the leadership debate dishonestly, they try to pretend that the good leader, in fact in this case they don't pretend, they are quite genuine. In their belief, the good leader is the one who leads in pursuit of their narrow interests. That's the conception of leadership they have. So my point on leadership, that South Africa doesn't suffer from a lack of leaders. We suffer from a lack of leadership, as I've explained it.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, where's the mic? Okay. Thanks. Is it working? Just want to take, I think the other questions have been dealt with. The Declaration of Independence of the United States, which was crafted and adopted long before Karl Marx was born, says, among other things, that all human beings have got inalienable rights, and among others, firstly is the right to life, freedom, as well as the pursuit of happiness. And so, on the one hand, you've got political equality. On the other hand, you've got economic equality. And in an unequal society, the two will always have a difficult and strenuous, creative, and sometimes very degenerative relationship. You cannot establish a sustainable, thoroughgoing democracy without establishing substantive economic equality. You can't. Which brings me to the point raised by Chris that he thinks that our democracy faces not threat. I think it does. There is no country that can sustain the high levels of inequality and unemployment and the low levels of growth that we're facing and still remain a healthy, stable, sustainable democracy. It doesn't work that way. So I'm saying the guarantor of a sustainable democracy, a peaceful, stable South Africa, is the resolution of the underlying socio-economic challenges facing the country. Let me give you an example. If you think I'm talking theory, then again, back to the media again. What the media calls fallaciously service delivery protests, they are not service delivery protests. These protests happen mainly in the working class communities. And they are protests against the local state. For the local state to improve the quality of their livelihoods. So now you can't enjoy democratic rights, express yourself culturally and so on, if you do not have solid foundation when it comes to livelihoods. So, the community protest, which is basically class warfare, local class warfare based, is actually both a protest against the state, which is failing to deliver in many ways, as well as the ruling classes incentive and elsewhere in the capitals of this, in the urban centers of this country. And actually, if you thought that it's only the ruling party and government who are worried about the local protests, actually the more worried section of society is the ruling classes. Because they know that on the other hand, there is deep scrutiny. On the other hand, there's annex, and they're in the middle. So, what then needs to be done? Because we've offered huge analysis here and so on. What then needs to be done? There are two things that developmental states have to do. By the way, all states are developmental. And the United States was actually the first country to introduce protection of infant industry. And a whole range of other, the New Deal saw a very strong state, a whole range of other policies, the Medicare introduced in the period between the 50s and the 70s and so on. And a range of other social protection measures introduced in the United States. Two things remain very key. One is that we must have sustainable higher levels of growth, which we do not have. The second one is that there must be structural change in the economy, which is not happening. All that we're having is the corruption that my colleagues were talking about. Well, we didn't caucus, by the way, but yeah, anyway. So, in that sense, we should be worried. Political leadership, I'm not talking about political leadership, I'm talking about the church. An example, there is a priest in this country
country who makes his brethren to eat grass and drink petrol. Just across down the road in the valley, we used to have a professor of a Valley University of Technology, Professor Makadi. Right? The academia is also not excused from this poor nation, who called himself the eagle and experienced the eaglets, and the rest followed to serious levels of degeneration, corruption, and so on. You can cite all these examples that are there. So, in the realm of politics, what do we have? We certainly for sure have a decline in ANC, so the ANC objectively is not the future. Right? The TA is not the future either, because the TA speaks about the liberal concept of an open opportunity society, and that's obvious. Right? Because you contrast that with economic equality, you find a different picture. Open opportunity society assumes that the conditions under which people exist do not shape their level of opportunity, access to opportunity, and how they use opportunity. So, yes, opportunity is created. It is one thing to have opportunity. It is another to have access to it and use it developmentally and succeed. And so, the one other element, for instance, I mean, the one point just before I sit down, that there has always been this illusion that the country is held back by the property clause and the constitution, that it is in the past 20 years failing to actually deal with the land question. No, that's hogwash. The constitution is very clear that in the instances where you have to intervene as a state in the public interest, you can expropriate land and actually use it for developmental purposes. And so the issue of leadership cuts across, but I'm not saying that you do not have pockets of success. Here you've got Chris. Thanks.
The University of Johannesburg. Rethink, reinvent.